All those who are that, we appreciate how they
The owl is calling. Okay, so I'd like to start with this side since I sort of started this way. So is there maybe one observation that you would like to share with the whole group that you came up with, that somebody came up with? No pressure, right?
We talked about when you're trying to present new ideas to a team that aren't comfortable or familiar, and the initial gut reaction sometimes can be, that's a stupid idea, why would I do it that way? We're all in a functional conference, and if we try to present functional ideas to a team that's not familiar with it, they just look at you like you're an idiot. And then your response is you're closed-minded, and so
Right,
it
so
puts up
it
these barriers
keeps,
immediately.
yeah, right.
So talking through how to approach that, and to say, instead of my reaction if I'm presenting this to say you're closed-minded, to just say, what is it that I'm not presenting well enough? What is it that doesn't make sense? What is it that concerns you about this? And get their opinion on, understanding they may not have a lot of knowledge about it, and so just trying to understand their uncomfortableness, their
Where they're
unease with
coming
it.
from, yeah.
Yeah.
So you're really touching into that empathic element that you were speaking about, is you're opening up to their world and what their reality is, and sort of saying, hey, I want to know what's going on. What how can I be more clear with you?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Beautiful.
maybe their interpretations, you're asking for their observations.
Yeah, beautiful. Great, thank you for sharing that.
And we'll do a little demo of that in a bit that might even show an additional way to handle that. Yeah.
Okay, you hold that.
I'm holding
You're
it.
holding that.
I'm holding it.
Okay, how about here? Is there anything you'd like to share?
I think the most interesting in our conversation was the tension between a workplace as a place for junior developers to grow and learn, and the constant deadlines that people have to produce a result, and how they conflict. And the senior developer comes in and just redoes it, because it's got to be done by Thursday. And the junior developer's like, well, then I started on it and you threw out what I did.
So that's an observation there, that there's a real need for space and to grow and learn, and that when you have a deadline, it comes to you again, and that's what it cuts into that. So how would you respond to, that's an observation of what's going on, right? Is that what you were coming up with?
We didn't resolve the best way. We
Okay.
acknowledged that there was two valid points.
Okay.
And we didn't ask you for a solution, we asked you for an observation.
Yeah, you're right, we didn't ask for a solution, but yeah, but also you were able to identify those two different realities. The pressure of needing to get something done, and also the need to experience it and being able to learn and grow more together when you're working. Clear? Is your group one?
I'm not sure we answered the question, because the question was technically ways in which observation only expression would help you at work. We more complained about things.
Oh, perfect.
I don't want to know what you're saying.
If you take a complaint, which is usually an evaluation or an interpretation, a judgment or something, then you could, what was your complaint?
Well, no. I mean, well, we came up with like examples of observations versus interpretation.
Oh, okay. Do you want to share one?
Yeah, there's one example, I guess. Since we have an interesting dynamic here because we have two people from Workiva, and then me and John, we work together. So one of our examples is I said, John prefers the front-end team over the back-end team because he prefers PureScript over Scala, and I don't know why. So that was like an example of that was an example of an interpretation, whereas formulating his observation would be saying, I've noticed that John spends more time interacting with the front-end team than the back-end.
Wow. Thank you. And that first phrase you said was Chinese to me, by the way. I knew what Chinese means. I didn't understand what you were talking about, but I knew it was something about software and stuff like that. Great. Should we move on from here, maybe?
I think we're getting good stuff.
One more?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're mainly just talked about like potential issues that came up that were failures to use observational expression. It's like things, you know, like having a fundamental attribution error where you say like, this is a trait of, let's say, this problems of tackling it situationally and seeing like what specifics led to that issue.
Okay.
Which doesn't like misdiagnosing problems.
So what is the observation?
Well, I mean, so there are just like some anecdotes that we came up with. That was what the issue was that, you know, this was what the failure was.
Oh, okay, so just sort of naming it?
Well, misdiagnosing the problem.
Misdiagnosing
Yeah,
it.
and that's the way, one of the ways where observational expression would help you not do that.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay. Sounds good. I'm wanting to go to the next activity because I think there's
Okay, cool.
It's a
Now,
good time
I
for
would
it.
like to, and maybe I could get somebody to pretend that I'm a member of their team, just a little short thing.
Okay.
Pretend that I'm a member of your team, and maybe from these folks on this side that we didn't hear from this trip. And you're going to give me an evaluation of something that I always do that bugs you, or sometimes do. And I'm going to give you a response that might shift things to an evaluation along the lines of what you guys were talking about, and just see if this helps. And of course, they may give me something where I can't do it, but I'll try. Okay. So, anybody got one? Bring it. Yes, ma'am.
You always interrupt?
I always interrupt. Would you tell me of a specific instance, what specifically you've observed that leads you to conclude that I always interrupt?
Am I supposed to role play now?
You can if you want, yeah. And then it might be, well, half an hour ago or something, you know, just something like that. But the point is, just a quick point that might be of help, is that instead of, you know, saying, well, that's not an observation, that's an evaluation, and when you say, oh, you always, I don't listen to the rest of it, which I've said to my wife, and it didn't work very well. Instead, I see it. Instead, to simply go with a request that is, what did you observe? What specific thing or things have you observed that lead you to that evaluation? And you don't have to use that language. The first hand was over here.
So one of the things I think we struggle with is a lot of our communication is nonverbal, like written.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to respond to someone saying, "You always ignore me," with, "Well, give me an example,"
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that could be interpreted in text as hostile, right?
Right. Well, give me an example.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, thanks. And so you're a little concerned and want to call to our attention that that tone is important. And I see various hands going up, and so I think I'm going to take the 3 hands that have gone up if we make it short. So
So I like that approach, but what if people come back and say, well, I can't remember any specific examples? That's happening.
I can't remember a specific
So when
example.
you do, write them down and get back to me.
To avoid the problem with email, whenever I get a response like that from email, I'm just like, can we talk about this?
Me too. I have a little Post-it note on the bezel of my computer at home that says, "Mr. Send is not your friend."
Alternatively, you can just put smiley faces on everything. But there's a really interesting point here that I wanted to just talk about, because I was lucky enough in university to have a course about communication because they realized that was one of the problems with engineers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I learned a lot from that course, and it was really useful to me. And one of the most important things I learned is to always not say you, basically avoid saying you, say like I feel this way.
Taking responsibility for your
Right.
statement. Yeah.
But in general, I think if you respond to something like, what particular instance did I do something, even in person that can seem hostile. And so I feel like there's a dilemma I have Because on the one hand, if you're talking with someone that's also, I guess, well-versed in this way of communicating, it's fine to just say, oh, what's an instance? They won't interpret it as a mean thing.
Mm.
But if you're not, and you never kind of know, you have to, like, you could prefix it by saying, well, it's not because I don't believe you, but I'd just be curious to see if you remember any instances, and even if you don't remember them, doesn't mean they didn't happen. I totally understand, like me too, sometimes I forget. But then this makes like conversations like super long, because
Right.
like defensive, like,
And you end up evangelizing their position in some ways.
So it's kind of like it's interesting, like I'm a little bit torn between making conversations concise but being very, non-aggressive.
So one thing I want to just choose to bring out, I see a lot of hands here, so then I'm going to hand it to you.
No,
You
let's
can
go,
start.
no,
Okay,
I'm
go what's
liking
alive.
what we're hearing, yeah.
Is that you talked a bit about how people interpret what you said, and that you notice that if somebody, particularly if they brought something that's really a judgment to you, how would you imagine they're feeling when they're coming to you to give you something pretty direct? Kind of a little defensive, guarded, some of those kinds of feelings. So you're right. It's it can be misinterpreted. Sometimes saying, I hear you saying and feedback what they're saying. I'm not trying to defend against it. I just want to understand. Would you be willing to give me some observations? Would that be a way to frame it? And again, I'm seeing hands up in my periphery, so just
Well,
want to check.
it's the same problem of like you have
Still
to kind of like
consistent.
make all your sentences longer because you're always guarding against someone misinterpreting.
We're saying
Yeah.
it would help me if you gave me some examples.
It would,
Saying-
yes,
saying-
simply saying, I want to understand.
Yeah.
Because intent, it's like the law, intent is 9/10 of the law. It's 99 1/100ths of conversation is if you can project your intent to understand, which sometimes it's just body language, other times, as you say, you can lengthen the conversation. And I want to move on, if I may, because I saw some other hands up, and I think that your hand was up next, and then I've got one over there and one there. Okay.
Just to agree with what people are saying, like, try to find a way to project why you're asking for observations. Like, I'm sorry that you feel that way, or I made you feel, or whatever.
Mhm.
You apologize and then ask, like, I want to be better at this. How can I improve on this? And it would be really helpful if we could talk through like specific instances. Just try to couch it as, I'm so sorry. And
Just to check, is this a situation where someone's given you some feedback and an evaluation and it sounded true to you?
the thing is, observations that are like when people have feelings, those feelings are valid regardless of what your personal intent
Yes.
is. And if people are projecting that as feedback, then that is real feedback. Whether or not you personally think it's true or not is irrelevant, in my opinion. So I'll couch that in my humble opinion. But like, so that's why when you receive feedback or when someone confronts you, this sounds like kind of a hostile confrontation. I think that's just a way to respond to it.
And what I think I want to say to your question is nonviolent communication and these approaches that we're taking is a pretty big field. I think that I could give you some coaching that would help you. It's getting a little bit out of this, it's kind of the deep end of the pool.
I suck at this stuff, that's why I'm here.
Yeah, and I wish we had more time, because what you're bringing up is really a cool, interesting subject that is called confrontation. And I can't give you a simple example that says simply dragging back to an observation that's going to sort that one out. Do you see? Is that okay if I
No, you're fine.
move on from it? And so I got you next, and then you, and we'll see how it goes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I feel that expectation plays a large role in defensiveness, and that if you are trying to get something out of someone, you usually won't. Whereas if you can express it like, hey, I feel like you interrupt me a lot, and I don't expect you to change, but I just want you to like look at that and be conscious about that in the future as we work together. That would help me. That's more, I'm just like addressing something about you, but not necessarily putting the spotlight on it, more just asking you to keep an eye out for it in the future.
So,
And then-
could I play with that for just a
Yeah.
minute? Okay, so let's say that I am experiencing you as interrupting, okay? And and so I'm coming to you to give you that feedback. And this is a little different way, and just to try,
Mhm.
okay?
Yeah.
All right, so, and your first name, please?
Basil.
Basil, in this meeting we were in, I noticed that I opened my mouth kind of early in it and said, to respond to Bill's question, and you interrupted me. And then, do you remember that? And then a little later, you interrupted me again as we were talking about XYZ. And then a third time, when we were talking about language typing, so I'm making shit up. And I just wonder if you noticed that you did that.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry, overdone it. We'll try to keep it on mind.
We'll do more on this later. But you get the idea. All I was giving you was specific observations that were factually true. I mean, they weren't because I don't know you, Basil, but I haven't been in a meeting except this one with you. Okay?
Okay, so when people approach me with something that seems like an evaluation of what I'm doing, I found that the best way to deal with it is to say that I'm sorry I was unaware of doing that, and I would like to improve. Could you give me some examples? Something like that. And sometimes the evaluations could be true, and it's something
It
that,
rang true to you in this case that you're
yeah, so maybe I haven't noticed that before, but I'm like, okay, I can see how I could have been perceived that way. Maybe, and maybe I truly can learn from that.
So
feedback.
I'm experienced, if you're saying this to me, I'm experiencing you as asking me for help. Was that your intent? Assuming that we just did this in conversation and you said, I said blah, blah, that you experience as an evaluation from me. And I got your intent coming back as, yeah, that seems true, and you're asking me for help because you want to notice it when you're doing it. Was that your
Right.
intent? Okay.
Yes, and
All right.
sometimes maybe an evaluation doesn't ring true. Or maybe the observation, I can see how I could have been perceived that way, but I know that my intention is not that.
And so you really want to be seen for your intention.
Yes,
Yeah.
so maybe I could still express gratitude for being made aware of how I could be perceived, but not for the purpose of changing my behavior, but maybe for the purpose of explaining the intention and as to why.
Yeah. And again, this is a little more complicated thing.
This is the dialogue.
I have a really good answer for that, and it doesn't involve focusing on observation. I'm sad that this is simply a bigger set of tools than the couple tools that we've chosen to pull out of the toolbox today in the interest of time. So it'd be all right if we table that one. We could, afterwards, I'd be happy to chat with, I think that's alive for some other people as well. And I got all the hands that I'd promised that I would reach.
Right, so let me
hand the
just
ball back to you.
let me do a check-in with you, because we have about a half hour left, and we
Okay.
have a bundle of things that we
Yeah,
have to
we
do
could
with
do a
you.
lot.
So,
Okay.
so we had sort of said that we were gonna go to the issues.
We can shorten that. Okay, let's do that. All right. Shift your chairs around and make a circle again. Doesn't have to be perfect. maybe make it a little tighter on the inside here so the folks on the outside have space, and just bring it around to where you're facing this so we can all be one big happy family again. You know where you're- Oh, yeah. You ready for that slide? Oh, well. You really want to see the words curiosity, care, and concern, you can see them on my screen. I can't get them up onto that screen. Hand up over there.
Yeah, why don't we discuss, no?
Oh, do we want all of them?
Yes, well,
We're not going to, we decided not to
I
use
think we're
that.
not gonna use them.
Yes,
Yes,
if
you could.
I'll collect the
You'll
cards.
collect
If
the
you put your
cards.
focus on Jacqueline, except I'd like the cards, that would be great. Thank you.
So I'd like to maybe just take a moment while we're transitioning here, just to have you all, now you're back in your seats, just take a little moment to connect with yourselves and do some of that internal observation that we were talking about earlier. Just like getting a sense of, you know, your feet are on the ground. We've been talking about a lot of things and bringing up a lot of really poignant questions. And so just getting a sense of maybe just lowering your gaze. You know, you can close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing that. Just lowering your gaze a moment. Don't have to look at me. And just get a sense of your feet on the ground. You know, your body sitting on the chair and how that supports you and your back. Just maybe get a sense of how your shoulders are right now. Just notice for a moment your breathing. Not changing anything. This is just about observing and noticing. Just take a moment to assess your sort of inner state right now. There's been a lot of exchange, and you've been working in groups and a lot of energy moving through, and just get a sense of where are you right now. Maybe just getting a sense of what matters, what's important to you right now in this moment. And you know, you might have a lot of thinking going on, but also bodily sensations and feelings coming up. Yeah, thank you. And just when you're ready, gently come back in. Yeah. Just like when there's been a lot of information exchanged, and just like we take in a lot of information, but how much do we let it actually sink in, connect with ourselves in that sort of deeper way and say, hey, where am I right now? And I like to do that more and more in my life because it's so easy to just get pulled into that busyness. So this is curiosity, care, and concern. And maybe just take a moment to look at these ancient figures. Just practice a little moment of internal observation there. What is that? Just sort of notice within yourself. What is that call inside of you? Just sort of holding that. And I just want to say that I heard, as you know, we did this last round, that some very poignant and more personal expressions of concern, of, you know, how to use observation when you're getting someone saying something to you, and you're getting that there's some feedback in there, and it's also hard to hear at times because many people express themselves in sort of more what we call violent ways. You know, it's not the you did this and you did that. It has a certain amount of violence and aggression to it because it might not have been our intention at all, what that person's saying. So there's something about empathy that I just want to touch upon because it's such an important element of nonviolent communication. It's that ability to be present with someone else. And as much as possible, which is not an easy thing to ask ourselves, is to clear our minds of all the judgments. Not that we don't have them, of course we're going to have them, but to let them sort of move away from the front of our prefrontal cortex, which is the one that sort of makes choices in our lives about how we want to be and how we want to express ourselves and what we want to do. So the piece of empathy is when we're in these conflictual moments, is to have empathy for ourselves, which is really just a receiving and welcoming of where we are. If we're upset or something, triggered us and it's feeling really uncomfortable, are we able to welcome ourselves in that experience? And I mean, most of us don't like to experience painful things, right? I mean, and we don't have a whole lot of place in our culture where it's like we're welcomed in that place. I mean, happy faces, right? That's what we're sticking everywhere. But the sad faces, the discouraged faces, you do so much work and then you're not received with all the intention you put into your work. I mean, that is darn hard. And so, are we able to welcome ourselves in that place? And on the other hand, can we welcome others? So that person that comes to us with those pressing deadlines and they're not even thinking about the work we did, but they're just there and put it on our desk. Can we have just one moment of curiosity and concern about that other person? And that takes a little bit of work to learn how to sort of detach the feelings we have and what somebody said or did, but that's just sort of an invitation to contemplate that in this work.
I just took a panoramic picture of our room. Excited. So, anybody ever feel a little scared before giving somebody feedback about some unwanted behavior? There's a couple of hands in the back, everybody else is real strong. Okay, get some hands down. Maybe just for a moment, kind of go there in your mind. Can you imagine the last time you gave someone some feedback? So you're there, you're right on the threshold of giving them that feedback. What's going on in your body right now? Can you feel, we just had a nice sit and breathe, so we all might feel a little relaxed, and so this might be stirring up a shift. Okay, you're just about to step up to your teammate and give them the feedback. What do you notice?
Fight or flight.
Bit of fight or flight. Yeah, where's that show up in your body?
Heart rate, gut.
Heart rate, gut.
Definitely anxiety, a lot of it kind of around your gut as well.
That's where it gets me to, right around here. Any other noticings? Okay. Well, we promised you some apps, some applications for this observation we're using. So, kind of a shortcut to giving the feedback might be to just give the observation. And Basil and I were playing with one where I just listed 3 times where he interrupted me, and you didn't, so we're good.
I was actually trying to think.
And, but you might any minute now. So, I'm watching your every move. So can you imagine doing that, just giving the observation? Give it a try. Okay. So randomly turn to a neighbor and think of a situation, and we'll just give it a try. We'll let you give it a try. Where you're just, think of something that you want to give feedback to somebody in your organization for a minute about something that's not floating your boat. And give them, and then pretend your neighbor is that person. Take a breath and notice what you're feeling in your body, and then just give them the observation. It could only be one thing. So an example would be, I noticed that this morning, we had this meeting with the client, and you were 15 minutes late. And maybe you have some other stuff about the impact on that. We'll get to that. But imagine that, and then see how the person responds. We're going to ask that you check with the person afterwards and say, okay, what did you respond? But in the moment, those of you who are the receiver, and we're going to switch, and this is going to be a very quick exercise. Try to respond as if you were the person. So try to give a one-sentence scenario. So the one-sentence scenario might be something like, yeah, I was had a meeting with our customer, and my buddy, my associate, showed up late, and I had to kind of present his material, and it was really frustrating for me. So that would be the kind of vignette, and then you do it just like that. So pick somebody next to you and just give it a try. Anybody have any questions about what we're trying to do? Just trying to get a little bit of the experience of just giving the observation and then stopping. And in our culture, the pause is not, I think, appreciated enough as a communication technique. My guys in San Quentin, the guy that I taught with had a t-shirt that he often wore that had the letters pause in this height. And as we'd gotten to know him, these are all guys on long sentences, and I didn't know what all their offenses were, but many of them involved the loss of someone else's life. As we went through this, so many times somebody would raise an example and say, if I had just known about this, I wouldn't be here. Because it was, either not owning their no in some way or not just stopping and taking a breath before a reaction. Especially out in California where premeditation takes 15 seconds. If the police officer questions you in a way that makes it sound like you had 15 seconds to make your decision, that's premeditated murder. Not to take us too far off onto that, a pause can be, because I just noticed a big shift in my body as I said that. A pause can really be your friend. And in this case, what your friend is doing is giving the other a chance to react. Because there might be something you didn't know about. Something that you didn't, go ahead.
It's interesting because I've done a lot of stuff with negotiation, and the pause is to make people defensive, to throw them off their game, to not give them enough information to react. So it's interesting that you're saying, do this to have almost the exact opposite effect. Because if you do say that, someone's like, all right, what else are they holding? Like, what are they waiting for me to say? And it can throw people off.
So I'm hearing that, and I teach mediation that's based on nonviolent communication, and we do use pauses, and it's with a different intention. Just to be sure I heard what you said, that in your negotiation thing, the pause is to create tension and to get them to blurt something. So, and I remember I used to be a sales trainer 30 years ago in one of my past lives after I was an engineer. And we would say, whoever speaks first loses, right? But, how about an example where you said that to someone, I noticed you were 15 minutes late. And the person said, and it turned out that the situation was something that you didn't know anything about, that they have a child at home who's really sick, and and it may be the cat ate my homework kind of thing. You never know, but it does give you a chance, and And I know that my stone guys may not have come through with these experiences, but if you can do the pause with curiosity, and maybe even a request that, you know, I noticed that you were 15 minutes late, and I wonder how it is to hear that would be an example of a request. Or you could just stop, but, you know, give a look that isn't, you know, because body language is really important. You know, and there are certain expressions that show concern, and there are other expressions that show, you know, just kind of curious. You know, I do a little bit of a puzzle on my face. By the way, I think of curiosity as one of the most enlightened states of consciousness. So anyway, in the interest of time, I'd like you to just briefly give this a try with your buddy, and we'll look and see how it's going. We may go in both directions, but I just would like to have you to have the experience of just simply saying the observation and then stopping. So,
Are there any questions about the exercise?
all right.
Okay.
Give it a shot. You're going to be working with a stranger, and that's okay. If anybody finds themselves not paired up, raise their hand. Find your partner. Anybody not have a partner?
Outside of work hours. I'm saying that.
Function right there before you even dress sounds very easy. I noticed that you dress like before you
Yeah, I guess that was my curiosity. It was just whatever I can come up with right now. Like, there's nothing else. It goes in the side of things, especially when you have the inside. So it really it cuts through all of the that you can wonder. Just gets right to the answer. It's already feel this.
Nothing's happened where right, exactly. Some of the problem might be like, sorry, I didn't realize that was a question that I wanted to do now.
I gotta find a way to put what I have in mind.
Would you like to switch and go in the other direction? So now would be time. So please try switching.
Yeah, sorry, I should have made some updates to the issues that come up some people unexpected and on class 4, so it seems like
have somebody start it, and like it's like a chain reaction kind of thing. So when you start being into that, something
So I'm going to take the first three hands that come up with just some quick reactions to how this experience was. Wow. Oh, that was a scratch of the nose. There's another scratch of the nose. Okay, here we go.
I think so. Hearing somebody make like a fake judgment on me, a quick snap observation, I guess, about something that I'm doing that wasn't necessarily real. I can feel like how it should go. Like I know that I have a couple of seconds to kind of collect my thoughts and think about how I want to respond to the pause. I feel like this kind of thing, I wish that I could experience it in like an actual real context, so that I knew exactly how I felt when somebody was actually confronting me with something like this. So I guess I'll just say like I'll try to do that when I take it back home or work.
Yay. So you notice that part of this, because it was contrived, the contrivance sort of dominated for you, and they were making an observation that for you just wasn't true.
I mean, it might have been true at one point, but it's not happening currently. Like, I'm not feeling anxiety about the situation already.
Okay.
But if I was actually late for a meeting, for example, and somebody came up to me and said, I noticed you were late for this meeting, I'm already going to be, like, I know that I was late for that meeting, and I'm going to be feeling anxiety about why, like, about that confrontation before it happens.
So I want to play with that, and in the interest of time, very short. If you make an observation of someone and then pause, one of the things that might happen is that you might find out that your observation wasn't true. And, late is, a little more objective, but there may be something a little more complicated. And it might be then give that person an opportunity to say that what you noticed isn't actually what I experienced, and, so that they could, so you would, if you could show up with curiosity, when you say, I noticed this, and are curious, they might give you something that you can use to understand, that your observation missed something important, or okay?
Just being on the receiving end, I really think I would feel appreciation, because with both of the examples given, it was really obvious what conclusion they might jump to. They gave the observation. Clearly there's this particular interpretation, but they haven't gone there yet, and they're waiting to hear what I say. And immediately, at least role-playing, I feel appreciation for that.
So you appreciated that they just gave you an observation. Maybe you feel safe, or maybe some more trust. Does that seem?
Yeah, well, they're holding off on the obvious judgment. Because in both the scenarios given to me, there was a clear interpretation that could be taken of those observations. If they're holding off, it means they're waiting.
And life is full of judgments. I don't know about you, but my parents was judge, and then judge how you were judging, and then go back to judging. Department of Redundancy Department. And this is part of what we're saying, and it is a great segue, and I know there are other hands up, and I'm going to use it segue because I can't resist, because you can use this first thing, this thing we just talked about, also to express appreciation. And think first of all, why is appreciation important? Is there anybody, you don't have to raise your hands to this, but might you be thinking, I don't think that my contributions are really appreciated where I work now. And I'm seeing some faces that are kind of going, yeah, there's a certain amount of that. And sometimes the appreciation that people use doesn't land. Any observations on this screen? And sometimes, as a matter of fact, it's kind of appreciation that you can't refuse. There are lots of categories of ineffective appreciation, and I'm sure you can think of some that haven't floated your boat, and in interest of time, I'll just talk about a couple that I heard of. One of them was where a person who I think you used the word introvert, someone who feels pretty shy in front of people, was called up on the stage and was the best of whatever her category of job was, and was given a plaque that said she was the best, and handed a microphone and saying, basically to say thank you or whatever, and it was awful. She really didn't enjoy that experience, so for her it was really unpleasant. And I'm sure you can think of other examples, many of which sometimes in attaboy, and like, so this guy in the middle telling you, I think you're great. Not so much. And Michael Corleone, not so much.
I think that's really appreciation.
But there are ways, using observation, that that'd feel pretty darn good. And is there any evaluation in there? Is there any great, not so great? And by the way, for those of you who have children, my daughter's named Piper, and she's now a web developer for Pivotal Labs. But when she was little, I sometimes would find myself saying, "Oh, Piper's a good little girl," and my wife got me aside because she understood some of these things way before I did, and said, if you have the right to make evaluations of her, good, bad, etc., you've taken that away from her, and that's not a gift. So you might think about this observation as something to use. And again, in the interest of time, what occurs to us is that we might like to have some observations about us. And I'll start by saying, Jacqueline, this is the first time that you and I have ever been in a group like this. And I really liked how you had, at various points brought so much clarity to the decisions we made about what to do. And we stepped aside, and you always, each time had, we could go from here, and I could. And so you had a strategy, so I didn't have to panic about she's changing stuff. I just had a lot of clarity. It wasn't very short, but was it observations? Yeah. So I'd welcome and this is not tell us how great we were at all, but just any observations you had, maybe of us working together or what went on, just anything that came up that's an observation only that you could give us. Yes.
When people had questions or input, you guys were able to respond in a way that validated them by repeating what they said in your own words.
Mm.
And I know how hard that can be, and I just really, I do appreciate seeing that.
Yeah, so you heard us do what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
I'm repeating that when someone says something. I learned slow, but I learned good. Any others?
I noticed that you split the group up into 6 parts to do that project, for that exercise, and each group kind of came to their own conclusion and talked about it, and then you asked each group what their conclusions were and what they came to. So each group got the other group's conclusions without having to even discuss it, and that was kind of like the divide and conquer, and I feel like we all got more out of it than just being in our own group.
Wow, you like how there's little communities and how the communities fed one another.
And then we
Yeah.
came into it.
Thanks, I like that.
I actually really liked how your group activities worked. I have a very strong teaching background, and sometimes people will give a small group a task that's bigger than a 5-minute exercise, but I felt like we actually had enough time to wrap back around in each of the little vignettes. And that meant that I didn't have to come away frustrated that we couldn't all get all the things. We had a bite-sized bit, we could go for it, we could pull back, and then we could hear what everyone else did. And I felt like that timing was really, really nice.
So you really like that we kind of honored your time and that certain things take,
You had an appreciation.
Yeah, thank you. First behind you and then you.
Okay. I noticed that, so we had these group exercises where we're doing a lot of talking, and you gave us like a signal that we should listen to so we know when to stop talking, and I thought that was effective.
Yeah, so it just gave you comfort that you'd know when to stop and that everyone stopped so that maybe you could all shift together. Is that that kind of thing? Okay.
I noticed that you seem to have a much bigger talk, and you allowed the group and its needs to kind of dictate how the 2 hours went rather than enslaving yourself to this is what we planned and we're going to get through it. And I don't care if anyone learns anything.
So you can see with how fast I went through appreciation, giving you another application that, that we stuck with what was going on in the room and kind of let go of, I mean, Jacqueline, I love that you said, go ahead and show the slides, because I think your slides were really cute on the, the last one. And, I found that one particularly, I was happy with that, so I appreciate that. And I appreciate you calling attention to it. I have time for one more, I think. Ooh, we're over. One more, if there is one, and it's okay. So in the back of the room, there are our business cards. You have our emails on them. Mine isn't current because it still shows my California address, although I'm still on the board of that company.
There's RMCCN.
And there's also the Rocky Mountain Compassionate Communication Network. There are lots and lots of classes, practice groups, books listed on there, lots and lots of stuff. So you'd be welcome to avail yourself of this. I can see people are intrigued, and I trust that you know that you've only scratched the surface of what's available. I've been doing this since 2003, and I'm still learn today and every time. So.
Well, I'm just tickled that you all showed up today. It's really, just really heartwarming to see the quality of conversations you were having and your ability to really zone in, and really use the time. So thank you all for showing up, and wishing you a wonderful conference, because I know you have 3 days of full activities and learning.
And I'm still knocked my socks off that we got only observations from you in that test. Because I've never, usually you don't get any. You get all of, well, you were excited, or, you were acting like whatever.
And I just want to, John, I just want to acknowledge you. I haven't really met you, right? You're John?
Yes.
John. He's the one who contacted me. And just holding your vision of how important communication is in this field of work, in all fields of work, but because this is your field of work, of how important it is to be able to collaborate and really bring out the best in each person, and that the work is so much funner and more effective, and the quality goes up. So I just want to thank you for also holding that vision for your world.
So if anyone has any energy to move tables, we could really use your help, because we just totaled this room. it was rows of 4 rows of tables, I think so. 3 rows of tables, and counting is a challenge.
Yeah, if 3 or 4 people want to.
And if people want to come